Okay. I think the genesis of this is kind of the answer to these questions that I have in the blue. And one of the major issues that's happened with PBS over the past few years is that, like most applications, we are certainly not unique in this, like most applications, the application has become more and more open. Besides the printing technology, this openness, in my mind, is one of the major reasons for moving from real world to PBS, for example. Other than IQ and Snow Report Writer, which were limited in their own way, there was really no way of getting at all of this precious data that you were putting into PBS or real world. With PBS and the XDBC or PBS and SQL, you really have full access to all of the data, and it's a matter of making the reports, making the queries, making the lookups, do what you need to do. That's very good for you as a partner, because the more you tailor a system for your customers, the more I don't want to be cynical about it, but in a sense, the more they're locked in. And they're locked in because they're happy. It's doing what they want to do with their business with all of its uniqueness. And that makes it also interesting for you because, I know myself, when I'm out in the field, one of the interesting things is to discover all the different things people are doing with the accounting system, some of which are surprising, and to be able to aid and abet these people in doing that stuff and getting it right. And so this is one of the major ways we can do that. It's an inexpensive way. We're not doing custom code. We don't have maintenance issues because unless the files change, which is not as frequent as the code changes, unless the files changes, this stuff continues to work release after release. Okay, what is SQL? What is XDBC? These are both ways of creating a connection between the PBS application and an external program, which I'm going to call for today's purposes a client. Now, the client can be any of the ODBC compliant applications. And what are they? Well, Excel, Word, MS Access, Crystal Report Writer, Fox Pro, any of the major database type applications, all of the Microsoft type applications, even in Word. All of those have the capability of creating requests using an ODBC format, Open Database Connectivity format, which can then be interpreted by the back-end SQL database or the back-end standard Vision database with the XDBC add-on. These SQL statements can then be interpreted by that and data returned to the application. So with only one or two exceptions, we're going to be spending almost no time in PBS because what we want to do is take the data out of PBS using these client programs. And just to show you the range of what's going to happen here, I'm going to be using Excel for creating spreadsheets. I'm going to be using a little bit of Access to create some connections, some links, some queries, and some reports. And I'm also going to show you Crystal Report Writer because it's one of a sample, a particularly good one in my opinion, but it's a sample of the range that you can get by buying a relatively inexpensive program for under $1,000, $700 or $800, something like that. And with the SQL or the XDBC, start to write some very sophisticated programs which will almost certainly cover everything your client needs. The almost certainly there is really based on the fact that PBS can't be all things to all people, but it approaches that kind of perfection best in the data that it has, not necessarily in the reporting that it has. In other words, it's got virtually every field that someone could want. There are exceptions, but it's got most of the fields that someone could ever want for doing business reporting. Whether or not they're used in the right way, in the right sequence, with the right filters, that's another big question. And because the application is geared to most people most of the time, it's inevitably going to miss those other people some of the time. And that's where this comes in. So ODBC is a connector. This talk is really the second of two talks. And the first one was introduced by Ian Creswell, who has done a lot of work in Access. And he presented this particular Access application to you. And it's just coming up now. And just to kind of all get on the same page, if you didn't see this, this is worthwhile, definitely worthwhile going out and taking a look at the recorded version of this, which Ian did, I think, back in December. If you have seen it, this is by way of a quick review of where we're coming from. And with this, Ian introduced the concept of a dashboard. And in that dashboard, what he'd created was a form with different buttons, some of which created reports and some of which gave queries. The point being here is that he was using the ODBC to take data out, reformulate it in some specific fashions as either an explicit report, as in print to paper type of report, or a query which would create a grid of certain data that you had chosen, like this planning grid. So, like I said, I recommend that you go back and take a look at this if you haven't already seen it. And even for those of you who have seen it, I will be making some reference to this particular item. This is a very neat idea that you can implement very easily for your client as a way of gathering together all the various bits and pieces that, in effect, I'll be talking about today, because I'll be talking about individual spreadsheets, individual crystal reports, and so on and so forth. But this is a really neat way of gathering it together to say, this is the XYC or ABC specialty company, and this is your dashboard to look at your orders or look at your bookings or whatever it is.